welcome back to Utility Sports. And literally the moment we end the stream, we have to start right back up again because literally the moment we ended it, breaking news, an NBA trade goes down. I swear to God, they're just waiting for me to hit the end stream button because the moment that I do, a big trade like this goes down, Austin. I was very, very close with what actually went down. So, Austin, let's break it down here. Shams Charania reporting Lakers, Jazz, and Timberwolves are finalizing trades sending D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, and Jared Vanderbilt to the Los Angeles Lakers, Russell Westbrook, and a first-round pick to Utah, as well as Mike Conley Jr. and a second-round pick in terms of compensation goes back to Minnesota. So we have a very big trade here. Of course, we knew Russell Westbrook was going to be traded at some point. I was 90% certain that we would see a trade today, a big, sizable one, and here it finally is now. Austin, I want to get your thoughts on it here. What is going on with this trade? And we'll continue to look for updated compensation, exactly what's going where in this deal. I know that there's a lot of moving pieces. So, Austin, what's your initial thoughts?
Yeah, so if you want to jump to Woj, he has more of the additional comments and details upon it. But looking at this trade at face value, the Lakers did very well. Now, I know they had to mortgage a lightly protected first to the Jazz, but at the end of the day, they are trying to compete right now with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, their two cornerstones, and they are definitely doing that, getting D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, who's a really nice shot maker, and Jared Vanderbilt, who's one of the more underrated players in the league. Overall, I think they did well in this deal. Now, when you kind of look at what Utah was able to do, they did exactly what they should have done. They should have traded Mike Conley and some of those other assets that they had acquired from the Minnesota Timberwolves in the Rudy Gobert deal and ultimately flipped that for another asset. So they do well in this one. Juan Toscano-Anderson and Damian Jones going to the Jazz as well. But then, look at the Minnesota Timberwolves perspective, getting Mike Conley, who very well, you could argue, makes them better right now in terms of actual fit. And then you also look at the other part. Minnesota gets the lesser of the Washington and Memphis second rounders, which is going to be clearly the Memphis pick is what that'll turn into. And also 2025 and 2026 second round picks via Utah. Now, if you think about it, Utah is not going to be necessarily competing in those years likely. So you kind of look at that as a net positive for the Wolves. The fact that those should be top of the second round draft choices is very big. So overall, I think the Wolves did okay in this one. Mike Conley, they're going to see how that fit goes. But it's kind of sad for what they had to mortgage for D'Angelo Russell, what ended up being the 7th overall pick in the draft, as well as Andrew Wiggins. And I think overall, Wolves did okay. I think the Lakers won this deal. But I also think, Utah did okay in this one as well.
Yeah, this is a big trade. Of course, we knew that a trade like this was going to go down. And ultimately one does, where Minnesota sends out D'Angelo Russell. About 2 months ago, I started sounding the alarms on a potential D'Angelo Russell trade. And then I kind of backed off of it a little bit with how D'Angelo Russell played in January. But it seems like management, the front office there in Minnesota, was determined to ultimately trade away D'Angelo Russell for one of Rudy Gobert's former teammates, Mike Conley, as well as getting, like you said, Austin, second-round pick compensation here. The exact verbiage here from Woj, 2024 second, lesser of Washington, Memphis, also 2025 and 2026 seconds from Utah. So they get 3 of them. In my mock trade just minutes ago, I had talked about potentially 4. We see 3 of them ultimately go down. So here, Minnesota actually kind of gets something exactly what I was looking at. And that big Woj bomb drops. Austin, I want us to think about some trade grades here. I already have my trade grade for the Los Angeles Lakers, and this is an A for them. Just given the fact of, what they were kind of positioned with, they did not have a good route here to improve their team. They really did not. And I think that they finagled their best way going forward out of this. Now, to give up a first-round pick for role players is kind of tough. Now, I would say D'Angelo Russell is probably one of the best players that they could have landed as well in this deal, just given the fact of, where they were at. For the Lakers, again, it's an A move for me. Just looking at, you get off of Russ, you get out of this situation, you put a more competitive team around LeBron, Anthony Davis, which they really deserve. Those 2 star players need better players around them. And they find a way to do it. D'Angelo Russell, I think, is a very good fit. He can fit off of the ball. Next to LeBron James, I think Malik Beasley, a very underrated player. For anyone who does not know, Malik Beasley is actually leading the NBA in three-pointers made off of the bench this season. So there's definitely a role for him with this Lakers team. We know how good LeBron is next to shooting. And then Jared Vanderbilt as well, a very good athlete, can play off the ball, very good cutter. D'Angelo Russell is back to the Lakers, which is absolutely crazy. Braden says, I can't believe the Lakers got Russell. Absolutely insane. Now we're getting asked here about a Jazz Russ buyout, Austin, which I think is very likely to come. He's going to get bought out of that contract for sure. Now, what were some potential landing spots in your eyes? Where can we see him potentially land? A team that jumps to my mind right away could be the Los Angeles Clippers, actually, which is, kind of unique. He might not even have to move out of LA after all, because we've been talking about a guard who could be explosive getting to the rim. That's Russ's game, right? So how does he fit in with the Clippers, and what other destinations could you see?
Yeah, kind of staying on the idea of the Clippers. I mean, he's definitely going to get bought out by the Jazz. I just don't think it makes any sense for them at this point. It's clear and obvious that they are selling, which is incredible with how they started the season, and now to the point where we've gotten to the sell mode, which is exactly what they needed to do, in my opinion. Now, when you look at the actual fit with the Clippers, I think it makes some sense. Now, pairing Russell Westbrook up with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, I think it is kind of an interesting dynamic at the very least. I think that there's going to be too many shots that he takes during his tenure there. But at the end of the day, if you're looking at a guy that is really going to pressure the rim, it is Russell Westbrook. And it's a perfect fit because there is so much shooting on this Clippers team. It's insane. So overall, this makes a lot of sense to me. I think Russell Westbrook going there is probably the most likely outcome. I'm kind of interested to see if Dallas makes a move, because Dallas needs another guy that can score the ball, just to be completely transparent with the move that they've made. I think that there's some more room for scoring. Therefore, Russell Westbrook actually makes some sense to the Mavericks.
Yeah, I wouldn't hate that necessarily off the bench. The Mavs still need another ball handler, in my opinion. They're best when they have three of them. But we do have insight on that Lakers 2027 first to Utah. It is top 4 protected, which is an okay protection for the Lakers. For those of you who do not know, the NBA draft lottery is actually only for the top 4 picks. So theoretically, if the Lakers were to move up in the lottery that year, hypothetically, if they're in the lottery to begin with, or if they're in a position where they have to, they're not good and they worry about losing a top pick, at least they're not going to lose a top 4 pick. So ultimately, with where the Lakers are currently at, they're trying to win now. Now let's talk about their roster overall, Austin. The Lakers, now you look at a starting lineup that likely features, in my opinion, you have to look at D'Lo, probably see Malik Beasley in there. Depending on what they want to do with Lonnie Walker, you could see Lonnie Walker maybe start instead of Beasley, but I think Beasley fits really well next to LeBron. You see Anthony Davis, and then maybe Thomas Bryant at the 5. And then off the bench, you now have the combination of Austin Reeves, Max Christie, who is so-so at this moment, but you think maybe long-term could become something. You also see you have Jared Vanderbilt off the bench, and then Lonnie Walker, like we talked about, if he's the guy you bring off the bench. You go from a rotation of like 5 solid NBA players to about 8 now at this point. What do you think about this, Austin, for the Lakers and their overall roster construction? Does this change how they play this season?
To be completely honest, I think it does a little bit. Now, it's kind of interesting. When we talked about the Lakers, there was a lot of depth issues, and we talked about guys just not having enough scoring punch off of the bench, and that was an issue this entire season. Now, with the ability to get a guy like Malik Beasley that can score the ball, especially be on the arc, that was one of those big things that they were lacking. They've been trying to fit pieces around, but Malik Beasley is an underrated asset in this deal. It might be the most important when it comes down to actual playoff basketball. Malik Beasley can heat up for this team and score willingly. Now, when you look at the LA Lakers, I think they did well in this. You had deemed this an A trade. I see this as anywhere from a B plus to an A minus level trade. Just considering the fact that D'Lo is on that expiring, that scares me a little bit. But you do have that ability to re-sign him. I mean, really, they're going for it. And like you had talked about, they kind of salvaged it the best that they could at this point, and where they were at the trade deadline. There was not a lot of options here that were going to open up for them to make their team a lot better. They get the job done. They salvage a first-round draft choice in 2027, which is a little bit scary for them, just considering we don't know the outlook of this team in the future. However, when you have LeBron James, you have to push the chips forward. That's exactly what Rob Pelinka did.
Yeah, it is exactly what he did. And I have my entire trade grade here. Austin, you can go ahead and give me yours afterward. But as for the Lakers, like I said, here's an A for them. That was my perspective. I completely understand yours as well, though, with a B plus, A minus. Now, again, with where they're currently at, it doesn't mean that they're a title contender. No. But I do think that this is a substantive upgrade with, two guys that have years left on their contract, and now they own bird rights on D'Angelo Russell, which I think is important for them. They actually have a semblance of an NBA roster, which I couldn't have said for them, 10 hours ago, which is why I'm very happy about this for them. Even though for the most part, I don't want the Lakers to be super successful. I just don't. But this is a good, strong move for them. And Rob Pelinka actually did something that I'm surprised he was able to do, which is make a good trade. The Jazz, A minus here. I think if they give that 2027 first completely unprotected, it probably comes an A for me. But I do think that you do limit some of the upside of trading for a pick that far out by having a top 4 protection. Now I'm interested to see what the backup protection is on that. That could potentially change my viewpoint on this as well. And then also the Timberwolves, I give them a B. I think Mike Conley makes them better this season. I just don't love it long term for them though. And because of that, it does hurt them a little bit, in my opinion. Important to note here as well, after running the numbers here, Minnesota actually takes in less money than they send out. So they open up a $3.7 million trade exception, which they could use on a biannual exception level player or a player who's on a partial tax pyramid level, which would be, somewhat important for them if they look to use that. The Lakers open up $2.3 million, which is important because that saves them some money against the tax and gives them a little bit more flexibility here. And then Utah, of course, takes in a little bit of money in terms of what they're harboring this year. But for the assets, it doesn't really hurt them at all. Minnesota, getting those second rounders, I think is really good. But I don't love it. Here we got some comments saying Russ to the Jazz is crazy. Here we have one saying Russ to the Miami Heat or the Brooklyn Nets. Could you imagine Russ playing with Kevin Durant again, Austin?
It won't happen, but I think it's a fun idea. I just don't think that those two would want to play together once again. A lot of beef.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so at all either. The Jazz now have 15 unprotected or lightly protected first-round picks through 2029 and a young core of Lauri Markkanen, Walker Kessler, Colin Sexton, Ochai Agbaji, plus about $60 million in cap space this offseason that they could potentially open up and make some moves. Welcome everyone to the stream. If you guys are new here, please hit that like button. We got about 400 of you watching right now. It would be awesome for each and every one of you to hit that like button, leave a like on the stream, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Again, it takes a second of your time, but it is definitely very beneficial for us. It helps us, grow the channel, and it lets us know we're doing a good job here at Utility Sports. Sire says, I'm a T-Wolves fan. Everyone hating, but we weren't going to re-sign D'Lo, so I kind of like it. I'm not hating on them. I think that this was a smart move for them. In the last live stream I just did with Austin here, I actually talked about how this was an upgrade for them. But I think that, with the salary that they had with D'Lo, they could have potentially upgraded in different ways and maybe got more of a substantive upgrade, which is what I would have liked for them. But at the end of the day, a B grade is still good. That means you made a good, solid trade. I don't think they nailed a home run. I don't think that they, had a no-doubter here, but I think that they had a pretty solid trade. I don't think that they lost value, just given the situation, the circumstances. We'll see if Conley can fit in right away, which becomes the big question, Austin. Looking at the standings right now, the Timberwolves are 9th in the West. They are half a game back, though, of jumping up to 7th, and they're only 1 game back of the Dallas Mavericks for 6th, which would help them avoid the play-in. With the Timberwolves' most recent trade, do you think that they're a play-in team? Do they make the playoffs outright? What's your thoughts on them for that?
I think they are going to be a play-in team. I don't think they have the juice down the stretch to necessarily catapult them all the way up to that 6th spot. I just don't see that being a realistic outcome for them. Looking at what the Timberwolves did, they do, in my opinion, just get a player that's a better fit for the here and the now. I think that's a really good comment by our viewer there. I just don't think that the Wolves were going to really re-sign D'Angelo Russell. So I guess when you look at it through that lens, it's definitely a position where they did okay in the trade. They, I think they're kind of sitting in that B to B plus range. That's probably where I would have, fully graded them out. But at the end of the day, Mike Conley makes them better right now, probably in terms of fit. They're losing some scoring punch. There's no doubt about that. But I think, like you had mentioned, with the actual turnovers and how that's gone so far this season, this is going to definitely tone it down for them. You're going to see the ball in Mike Conley's hands a lot, creating for others and really, getting some good shots for guys. I think overall you're going to see some of their field goal percentages go up. But at the end of the day, I think what I get stuck on is what they had to give up for D'Lo initially, which should have already been, quote, a sunk cost at this rate. But I seem to not be able to get that out of my head.
Right. I completely agree with you because, again, like we talked about in our last live, they gave up Wiggins. They gave up the pick that became Kuminga, which was a massive loss the moment that they made that trade. I know a lot of people on the internet, with the way that Wiggins was perceived at the time, liked that trade for Minnesota. You and I never really felt that way. You and I were a little bit higher on Wiggins than most people. We thought it was kind of, we just didn't really love it, especially with D'Lo, some of his deficiencies. And like Eric White's saying here, Mike Conley is definitely an upgrade over D'Lo for them. And I think the for them part's really the key thing here. Minnesota turns the ball over too much, and defensively they have some limitations out on the perimeter. Jaden McDaniels is one of the best wing defenders in the NBA, if not the best wing defender this season. And a lot of those analytics will back that up. I know it sounds a little crazy hearing me say that, but it's legitimately true. But the rest of the team, outside of Gobert and Jaden McDaniels and Taurean Prince and Kyle Anderson, the rest of the team doesn't really defend that well. And, Cat's going to really amplify that when he comes back. So Mike Conley, even being a slight upgrade defensively over D'Lo, does go a long way. Plus, he takes over the ball, and he's going to limit those turnovers, which we've talked about at length. Limiting points off of turnovers, limiting fast break points is going to go a long way in helping this Minnesota team continue to get better and better and better. And yes, Sawyer, the Wolves did get Nickeil Alexander-Walker as well. He's on a 1-year, $5 million deal. Ultimately, for me, I don't believe in Nickeil Alexander-Walker at all. Austin, I know you really like his cousin, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He was one of your favorite players back when he was a Clipper even. Are you buying anything in Nickeil Alexander-Walker, or do you think this is more of a money component here?
Something that's kind of interesting and noteworthy here is I go to double check on his stats in 36 games this year. He's actually shooting around 40% from the beyond the arc. So that's kind of interesting. When you actually look at his attempts per game, it's only about 2.5. But nevertheless, it is a decent enough sample size to say that he has improved. If you remember when he first came into the league, struggled shooting the ball from beyond the arc slightly. He's improved those percentages. He actually had, when you look at the big sample size, he was shooting like 5 to 6 3-pointers a game. Now it's, cut in half. So that's why you're seeing some of that efficiency rise. But at the end of the day, like you had said, with the contract and everything, this is not one of those things where it's like, oh, that's a big added bonus to the deal. However, there is some upside.
Definitely something we could watch for. And I do want to go over to Chris Haynes here, who does some reporting for Bleacher Report. And like we had kind of talked about, Austin, immediately once this deal got down, this was the first team we talked about. Should Russell Westbrook secure a buyout from the Utah Jazz after the 3-team trade is complete? The LA Clippers are said to have interest in the star guard, league sources tell NBA on TNT. And Austin, luckily we have a Clippers fan here. I know he's wearing an H-Town jersey. It's because he loves James Harden. But when we're talking about the Clippers here, this is your guy. Austin, I want to know, what's your thoughts now as this seems to be more and more likely that Russ stays in Los Angeles and is now playing for a different locker room, a different team in Crypto.com Arena. What's your thoughts initially?
Well, you got to think bright lights of LA. You got to think Clippers, Lakers. Think about the intense rivalry that Patrick Beverley had with the Lakers, and then he ends up going over there. Now you get the reverse. Russell Westbrook is potentially going to the Clippers. Now, this is not done by any stretch of the imagination. However, I think this is going to be an intense rivalry. Russell Westbrook already, I feel, has beef with his current Laker teammates or former teammates now. I think this is going to be awesome if that's the case here, because when you look at Russell Westbrook and what he's going to be able to do for this team, and a lot of people think that he absolutely just sucks, and that's just not the fact of the matter. Does he take unwarranted shots and shots that should be ill-advised? Yes. Do the analytic boys get super annoyed by it? Yes. And then that's what perceives the media saying this guy just is awful. He's not awful, in my opinion. A lot of people will probably disagree. But at the end of the day, if you're able to get him to play within a role, which we had seen the Lakers, kind of have him buy into that, Sure, he's not going to be super efficient, but this is exactly what the Clippers need, a guy that can put pressure on the rim. And, ultimately, I think this would be a very, very nice fit. Completely opposite of what it was for the Lakers, who did not have enough shooting. This Clipper team has almost, too much guys that are standing on the perimeter. You need some guys that will get to the rim, apply pressure, and ultimately create some kick-out opportunities. Therefore, should be an uptick in 3-point attempts, in my opinion.
Right, especially open ones. And I think that's the key thing missing from the Clippers right now. I love Russ to the Clippers. I think that's going to be a phenomenal fit, especially if he is still willing to come off the bench like he has been this season. For the Lakers, I think the key here is you see in the playoffs, Zubac comes out, Russ comes in, and you put Paul George, Kawhi Leonard around him, maybe Luke Kennard if he's still a part of the team, and then probably have Nick Batum play some of that small ball center. You still have enough length, size, athleticism to make that work. And you put the ball in Russ's hands. And, maybe you pull Kawhi out of the game in this moment, or you pull Paul George out of the game and let Russ be your primary creator with 4 guys standing out on the perimeter, 5 out spacing, driving kick game. Russ is still so athletic. We saw it last night even against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Toward the end of that game, Russ scored 14 points in the fourth quarter. Nobody could keep him out of the paint. And I still think there is value for him in this league. I still think he's a solid player. The fit with the Lakers was never going to be good. I told you guys that years ago. The moment that trade happened, I said, look, this is not going to end well. It didn't. But now he might find another opportunity in LA with the Clippers, and I think it's a much better landing spot. Thomas here wants to know, is Karl Anthony Towns next from Minnesota? Will D'Lo and Towns' friendship now lead to Towns wanting out due to how they treated one of his good buddies in D'Angelo Russell? Austin, we've been talking about this for a while on the channel, and you and me both off camera as well, about Karl Anthony Towns and the potential that he is not trade eligible this season because of his extension, but he will become trade eligible this offseason after the NBA Finals take place. So, Austin, what's your initial prediction on this? Karl Anthony Towns, how many more games does he play with the Minnesota Timberwolves?
I think it's going to last until this summer, and I think they're going to have to make a very difficult decision once they get to that point. They're going to have to kind of look at it and say, okay, Karl Anthony Towns, it depends on how this final stretch of the season goes. He's not going to get traded here at this point, but in the offseason, I think there's a real discussion that he does get moved. I think it's probably 60-40. I actually believe he is more likely to get moved than he's not. So bold prediction there, but nevertheless, this is a team that is now Anthony Edwards' team. I don't think the fit is necessarily great from what we've seen in the early part of the season. However, the same could be said about D'Angelo Russell, and that was really the outcome that we saw there. D'Lo was not a true fit for this team. He's out the door. I think Tim Conley doesn't hesitate when it comes to the summertime. I think Towns is gone.
One thing I'm going to say here, and this is going to be a little bit of dramatic. This is going to be dramatic. There's going to be a lot of people saying, "Whoa." Do not rule out a Karl Anthony Towns swap with Trae Young this offseason. I'm going to say that. I would not rule that out. I think that is something that could be very, very possible. Cade, thank you for that. Nicest comment I've read today. I really appreciate you. That's awesome. Michael says, bricks are expensive depending on the type you're wanting. You could be looking at over 10,000 in bricks. Jaden says we would never trade Cat. He's our saving grace. Yeah, he's so good that he was so bad defensively at the 5 that they traded for the best defender in the last 10 years in the NBA, and they're still bad defensively. And by the way, once Karl Anthony Towns went down, they started to win. I wonder why. But yeah, keep talking about how Cat is a disgrace. Cade, it's interesting because I think you're watching me, so I don't necessarily know what you're talking about, but I'd love to hear your thoughts, Cade. Let me know. Crown says players are jockeying to get to the Lakers. I don't think they're that great. Michael Scotto here now reports the Timberwolves and D'Lo were far apart on extension talks. Minnesota acquires Mike Conley now, who again, like I said earlier, is averaging over 8 or roughly 8 assists a game. So, I'm loving that. For Minnesota, I do think that's one of the positives for them. Looking at this deal, Dudinsky saying Scottie Pippen Jr. times Malik Beasley. Yeah, no, it's probably not going to be the Pippen Jr. show in LA, but definitely a funny situation. Colin says Cat not as good as people make him out to be. And Jaden said never said he was a good defender. Yeah, he's a brutal one. In fact, you could argue one of the worst defenders in the league. I just don't think he's that good, because he doesn't really impact winning in a super positive way, in my opinion. Sawyer said, found your channel because of this trade. We'll for sure be tuning in the future. Well, glad to have you, Sawyer. It's a lot of fun having viewers like you in here. We got almost 700 people watching live as we currently speak. I want to hear your guys' trade grades. Lay it out in a fashion like this, where you give the Jazz grade, then you give the Timberwolves grade, like so, and then give me the Lakers grade as your final take here. Just laid out exactly like how I'm typing it right now. I will put it on screen so you guys can see exactly the layout that I have done for it, because then that way it's very clear on who you're grading for what. So I laid it out like this. So give me your Jazz grade, your Timberwolves grade, and then your Lakers grade. And I would love to see exactly what you're thinking. Austin, I know you gave me your Lakers grade around a B+, A-. Could you remind the viewers what your grades were for Utah and then also Minnesota on this one?
Yeah, Utah, I give this an A-. I think overall this is exactly what they had to do. They understand their timeline. They understand what they're trying to do in the future. And I think they did a pretty good job netting what they had to and trying to maximize the assets from the Rudy Gobert deal. That Lakers pick could be very valuable. And like you had said, though, putting a cap on it with that protection is a little scary to me. That is the true upside in trading for a pick that far out, is because we just don't know what's going to happen. Nevertheless, they end up getting a future first-round pick. I like that. And then when you look at it from the Minnesota Timberwolves perspective, I think, honestly, they do get better right now, and people are going to say, whoa. Mike Conley, D'Angelo Russell, D'Lo's a way better player. In terms of actual fit and what this team needs, to me, it makes sense what they did. It makes a lot of sense to looking for a guy that's a really good playmaker who just doesn't turn over the ball, and that is the fact of the matter. And when you are able to plug in a guy like that, a true veteran, in a locker room that needs a guy to be a voice, to me, that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of youth on this team, but getting a true veteran and a guy that was super effective with Rudy Gobert in a lot of different Jazz lineups, doesn't matter who was really around him. As long as those two were on the floor together, it was an effective lineup defensively and offensively, very, very efficient.
Yeah, I think that the one thing about the Timberwolves, I was a little harsher. I gave them a B. And just looking at the situation with Minnesota, if Mike Conley wasn't 35 and he was maybe 31, 32, this would probably be an A or an A- grade for them as well. I think, like you said, Austin, the fit, the limiting turnovers, I think those are all key areas of need for Minnesota. I really do. I think this is a poignant targeted addition for them. The only thing is, looking at it long term, I just don't necessarily love it. Now, the fact that you're losing D'Lo for nothing potentially, if you are in fact far away on contract extension talks, then it's understandable. Now, again, based on value, do I perfectly love it for them? No, but again, it's not that I'm not condemning them. I think they made a good trade. Did they make a great trade? Maybe not, but I don't think they made a bad trade by any stretch. That's C or lower. Would be a really bad grade for a team. I gave my Mavericks an F for the Kyrie thing because I think that's going to be a disaster. Now we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Hopefully I am. Jimmy gives the Lakers an A, Wolves a B-, and the Jazz a B-. Definitely high on that for the Lakers. Tyler gives the Lakers an A as well. Josh here gives the Jazz an A, Timberwolves a B, the Lakers an A. Thomas here gives a B out in that deal. Aki gives the Jazz an A, Timberwolves a B, Lakers an A. So we're seeing a lot of A's for specifically the Lakers and Jazz, although Jaden here gives the Jazz a C, the Lakers a B+, and the Wolves a D, which I think is a little harsh there. And then we get an A, B, and an A in this deal. Bursch, Mr. Bursch himself gives an A+ if Towns gets traded. I know that household is not the biggest Karl Anthony Towns fan, and I can't necessarily say that I disagree. And it's interesting. Golja, thank you for yours as well, gives the Jazz a D-. So definitely he thinks out there that maybe there were better offers for Beasley and Vando that they maybe could have gotten. Johnny wants to know, is the trade final with the Lakers? Yes, it is. This deal, although it's not sent into the league office yet, it is officially reported on to a point where teams have agreed on compensation, assuming that all these players pass their physicals, and given the fact that they've all been playing, that ultimately, these players are on the move to the teams as reported. Mike says, gives the Jazz a C, the Wolves a B, and the Lakers an A. Not bad there at all. Now, Venkata says, Clippers need to trade for Fred and Christian Wood now. Austin, what do you think about the idea of still trading for Fred VanVleet, have him be your starting point guard, and then adding Russ as a buyout off the bench? How much do you think that would help the LA Clippers in the postseason?
I think that cuts Reggie Jackson out of a rotation, as well as, coming to the idea that John Wall is not really going to be in that rotation anymore, if that is kind of how that ends up going. Therefore, Reggie Jackson would get dealt. I think that that's a very realistic outcome for them. Reggie Jackson, I think, in my opinion, regardless of kind of how this all shakes out, I don't think he'll be on the roster post-deadline, to be completely transparent with our audience. He was once a postseason hero, now a guy that is just another rotational player that has not been super effective, not super efficient, therefore expendable, in my opinion. He's a big part of that playoff series against the Jazz, and as well as getting into the Western Conference Finals when they played the Suns. And now I think that they are going to get a point guard, whether that's the buyout market, whether that is a trade. Maybe they end up getting both, like you had mentioned here. So could be kind of an interesting compensation package for Fred VanVleet, but I'm kind of curious to see what happens with Russell Westbrook and which domino falls first.
Reggie Jackson has to have one of the funniest careers in NBA history. Just look at him, like, off the bench for OKC early. Looks like he's turning into a star. Gets traded to Detroit. Has a really nice kind of initial year there, and then gets to a point where the Pistons don't even play him anymore. Looks like he's going to be out of the league. He joins the Clippers. Has a terrible first series in the playoffs against the Mavericks, and then becomes kind of this postseason folklore type hero for the Lakers, or for the Clippers, excuse me. It's just kind of a funny turn of events for him. ITK here gives the Lakers an F for fantastic, and the Wolves get an A for average. That's a clever wordplay there. Golja again gives the Jazz a D-, Wolves a B+, and the Lakers an A with his updated grades here. Justin Archer gives the Jazz a D, Wolves a B, and the Lakers an A. Crown64 says somehow in some way Lakers eventually end up with a championship team every 7 to 8 years. I mean, I don't know. They went from their last championship was 2010 all the way through until 2020, until the bubble championship. So I don't know about 7 to 8 years. There were some really painful years in there as well. So, I mean, LeBron James kind of came and saved the organization. So there's no LeBron 2.0, I don't think, coming their way. So we'll see. Van Strife here says, I like the swap for Timberwolves just because of the locker room implications. It really seemed like D'Lo wore out his welcome there. And Austin, I want to get your thoughts on this too, because this is an important part of the NBA as a business. We think about this as like, oh, what's the player's value on the trade market? Sometimes, like, and I think we saw this a lot with Kyrie, when you're dealing with a player for, years and years and years, and you have to actually interact with them, sometimes people just don't get along. How much do you think that actually comes into play when it comes to NBA trades and just trades in pro sports leagues in general?
I think it's kind of like, I mean, you operate this like a business, and some people that are not willing to buy in, or there's just a lot to deal with on a day-to-day basis, we're out there welcome, like the comment states. And I think this is just very true, like in life. So at the end of the day, I think that does play actually a major factor in terms of decision making. And you have to have everybody on board. You have to have everybody buying in, especially when you're a championship level team. That is something that is never talked about in these deals, is locker room interaction. Everything is kept behind closed doors for the most part. Every once in a while, you'll have a leak, and you never know if it's true or not. So at the end of the day, I think it's a major part of the decision-making process is the actual team chemistry, what they're like in the locker room, what they're doing on and off the court. All of that plays a part in terms of, does this guy have a future with us? It doesn't matter how talented they are. At times, I think to a degree it matters, but there's also the part of it where, are they a good locker room fit? Are they a good team player? Are they a guy that's willing to step up and help out others? There's a lot of other things that go into a trade.
Right. And I think everything you said there is true. And I think Kyrie Irving is kind of the perfect example of that. A player averaging 27 points a game, a guy who has hit big shots in NBA finals before, doesn't get traded for, a far out future first and 2 role players. Right. But that's what we saw this week. And to be honest, the team that gave all that up for him, I felt like was the losing team, just given some of the drama that has always followed Kyrie Irving. Now, of course, we're hoping that he, figures it out in Dallas and fits in really well. But fitting in is a hard thing to do for some players, and we've seen it, really, affect the NBA in trades like this for D'Lo, trades like this for Kyrie Irving. So we've seen a lot of moves. Jason here, Austin. Jason's a big-time Clippers fan, and he's saying, no, we do not want Russ. I think Russ would be really helpful. I think Russ would be really helpful. Guilty here says the deal is vetoed for basketball reasons. Chris Haynes also reporting now that the Chicago Bulls are interested in signing Russ should he secure a buyout with the Utah Jazz.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
Why?
that makes
Why?
That makes a ton of sense. Just given, Billy Donovan and also Lonzo Ball being out. I think that makes a lot of sense. Austin, what's your thoughts on that with their current situation going on as well?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like it. I don't get it from my perspective. I don't understand why. I mean, this team, like, I understand them trying to make a push, but it doesn't move the needle enough for me. But at the end of the day, if they're trying to compete, so be it. But at the end of the day, to me, I don't love that.
Right. And I do understand too, like in terms of like their actual roster construction and their fit, I don't think it's as like clean as say the Clippers here. Just because, the Bulls have a little bit less shooting, I would say, and they don't maybe have the same star power in terms of equivalency from, Kawhi and PG compared to DeRozan and also, a guy like Levine. But I do think in terms of like the people perspective here, Billy Donovan was Russ's coach in LA, in Oklahoma City, excuse me, obviously a bad misspeak there on my part. But, clearly, those relationships do matter. Like we're talking about, this is a business and, the people, can take you a long way in this, which is why the Bulls maybe would have interest and maybe Russ would prefer them because of that relationship with Billy Donovan. He maybe feels more comfortable and he might even be able to walk into a starting point guard job, which is a very interesting turn of events and a dynamic that I don't think we were really expecting after he took that bench role this year. But Austin, it's an interesting discussion, and I think there's a lot of different teams that are going to come up to the conversation. Hartheimer here says, no, I believe Russ is bad now. He does not shoot well anymore. Yeah, he's been very inefficient for some of these past few years. Basketball Mixtapes gives the Lakers an A-, Jazz a B-, and the Wolves a B-. So definitely he prefers the value there for the Los Angeles Lakers. Sal here says Reggie Jackson, John Wall barely in the rotation anyways. There's been some issues with Reggie Jackson's effort defensively the last couple of weeks as well, if you've been following that situation a little bit. Arthur says, I'm in the UK, bro, so I don't know what afternoon is for you. Yeah, no worries. You're all good, Arthur. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully you do enjoy. Aki Dragon says LeBron will be 42 and 27 when that Lakers pick goes to the Jazz. Right, he's going to be very old. I think the Lakers here are hoping that if they are able to find a way to win and win big within the next year or two, that it's all worth it. But it's definitely a bet. The one thing I do want to say about the Lakers here too, some people are going to be worried about their long-term flexibility. Malik Beasley has a team option for next year. Vanderbilt only makes $4.4 million next season, and D'Angelo is expiring. So ultimately, if they wanted to operate with cap space, they still could. For a potential signing, say, of Kyrie Irving. But at the same time, then why did you give up a 2027 first, which is really the big question. Austin, do you see it possible if this doesn't work out that they operate with cap space, or do you think that they're kind of locking themselves into that trio for next season as well?
I think they're kind of locking themselves into the trio, to be completely honest. I think this is the direction they want to go. I don't think they trade for D'Lo and give up that valuable future asset to just partially push the chips in. I think they want to run with this long term. And I think D'Lo obviously fits a lot better than Russell Westbrook. This team is going to be much improved, in my opinion, moving forward. In terms of actual fit, Vanderbilt and Beasley and D'Angelo Russell, a really nice trio that's coming into town. I think when you look at the actual out the door, in the door, I mean, it's a landslide. Lakers improved, drastically at this point. They're going to be much more competitive when it comes to postseason basketball.
Yeah, they definitely will be. And I think that's going to be that's really the main goal, right? When you have some of the players that you have in this league, you need to try and win, especially when you have star players, superstar players, and arguably the greatest of all time. That's kind of the way that you're looking. For Bruce here, he says, just got here. Welcome back to the stream, Bruce. He says, what's the trade? The Lakers land D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, and Jared Vanderbilt. In return, the Utah Jazz land Damian Jones, Juan Toscano Anderson, and also in that deal, they also get a 2027 first, top 4 protected from the Los Angeles Lakers, and the Minnesota Timberwolves land in this deal. Of course, Russ also goes to the Jazz, but he's going to get bought out. And then the Timberwolves receive Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Mike Conley, who's really the main player in this, and then 3 second-round picks, one of them in 2025, one of them in 2026. So pretty decent return for, I think, all teams involved. Jimmy here says this guy seriously knows the NBA. I know he's talking about Austin. Austin, you've been doing a great job covering. Justin here says Wolves B, Jazz B, Lakers B. Looks like a fair trade. That's what Justin sees from it, and maybe one that he considers not super important in terms of moving the needle for any of these teams, which you could argue is true as well. Jimmy says Jazz gets B. The Jazz get a B, and that B stands for buyout. I like that one. That's a top comment there from Jimmy. Here, Gold just saying, what the heck? Utah gave Conley, Beasley, Vando second-round pick for a first-round pick, top 4 protected. That's not a good return. I can think of 5 packages from the Nets, Mavs, Golden State Warriors, Memphis that are better. Now, the one thing, though, is we don't actually know if those offers have been better. You know, maybe Danny Ainge is kind of cutting bait here and saying, look, the offers from Malik Beasley and Vando have not been as good as I was hoping. Maybe this is one of their few routes to a first-round pick, and maybe they're kind of hedging and saying, look, we think the Lakers are going to be really bad in 2027, which I think there's a good argument for. Austin, which way do you think it really is there? Are the value for those players not as good as we had originally anticipated? Or is Danny Ainge here kind of betting against the Lakers?
I think that when you look at how this was constructed, now Danny Ainge knows what he's doing. That's a fact of the matter. We've seen it through the course of history. He understands draft pick value, how to obtain picks, and the right strings to necessarily pull to make trades happen. Now, when you look at it at face value, you might say that collective group of players is worth more than what they've received. Sure, maybe. Now, individually, is Jared Vanderbilt, netting a first-round pick? Is Malik Beasley netting a first-round pick? That's a lot of questions that we have to ask. Maybe in terms of this deadline, it was not netting that, because if that were the case, he would have made more individualized trades for those certain assets rather than making it one collective group. I think, yes, he's betting against the Lakers, but in that same vein as well, you have to consider that they made it a top 4 protection. So it's not that, in my opinion, because if that were the case, they would have 0 protection on it, and they would have just, been able to net that betting against them. If they were truly betting against the Lakers, that's, they wouldn't have had that protection in there. They wouldn't have allowed that for that to transpire. They would have opted to go with another deal. So I think this is speaking volumes to what was available currently in the trade market, what was being offered up, and they deemed this as the best package that they could net, because obviously Russell Westbrook is not the pulling factor here. Damian Jones and Juan Toscano-Anderson, also nobody's in this deal. So to me, this was the best offer that, really became available for them. And I think that's more or less the reason why they ended up going here rather than trying to individually trade some of these guys. I just don't think the picks were necessarily out there. I think teams are kind of standing pat. Let's remember here, the Jazz and the Thunder own like half the league's, picks at this point, seemingly. Just at face value here, we have to understand there's some teams that are trying to hold on to some of these assets, maybe not trying to trade for, a Jared Vanderbilt or a Malik Beasley. In my opinion, maybe other people feel differently about it.
Right. Thomas here asking if I see the Timberwolves going after a point guard before the deadline or in the offseason. To be honest, I think the front office in Minnesota feels really good about Mike Conley. I've had him circled for 3 months, Austin. I've been telling you for a long time that Mike Conley is going to be a Minnesota Timberwolf this year. I told everyone that I work with, even too, down in, I'm not going to get into that too much, but I've been telling everyone that the Timberwolves are going to trade D'Lo for Mike Conley. I had a very good feeling about that. I've been very vocal about that in the last 3 months. I kind of quieted down in January a little bit with how D'Lo had been playing. I thought maybe, just maybe, Minnesota reconsiders. But ultimately, my initial gut feeling, my initial prediction ended up coming to complete fruition that Mike Conley's the point guard of this year and next year for sure for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I think he is a good fit with the team. I really do. Moody here says all teams won in my opinion. And now we have a question here that I thought was a pretty good one. Let me see if I might have lost it. Oh, here from Runner. He says, does this mean Thibault is staying with the 76ers? Because I was starting to want Jared Vanderbilt for him. Ultimately, no. If I look at the 76ers' current need, I think backup center is a big one. And I think there's a really good option out there for them that does make some sense in terms of money. Now, this is not going to be the most exciting name. But again, we're looking for somebody who can give you 10 spot minutes in the postseason that is better currently than Montrezl Harrell. And I think that's Alex Len from the Sacramento Kings. He can fill minutes for you. He's going to be semi-reliable. I could also see Trey Lyles as a possibility there, although the Kings I do not think will want to give him up. given their current playoff seeding. So what I think is Thibault to Sacramento for Alex Len and 2 second-round picks is kind of the going price for Thibault, just with what his value is in the final year of his deal. I just really don't see him being that valuable for a guy who plays 15 minutes a game. I know 76ers fans are going to say, wait, what? Trust me, a guy playing 15 minutes a night is not that valuable in today's NBA. It's just kind of the way that things really, play out in the league, to be honest. John here says Russ going to go to a team of shooters and play really well, play his style. He did not fit with the Lakers. Exactly. This is a guy who still was averaging triple doubles before going to Los Angeles, and I still think has a role in this league for sure. Chris here says, I'm so confused. What did us Jazz fans get out of this? A draft pick? Yeah. And now with where you guys currently sit, you have 15 first-round picks between now and 2029, which is a good amount in terms of flexibility, ability to later on trade assets to improve your roster. Think about it. If Utah gets lucky this year, not only did you end up getting future draft picks, you improve your odds by being worse this year at a potential addition of maybe a Scoot Henderson or a Victor Wembanyama in the draft. Maybe you end up getting Brandon Miller or Amen Thompson, all guys who could help this team long term. I really like that for Utah. And then what can happen is, let's say you do get one of those guys this year, and you start to build a core of Lauri Markkanen, Walker Kessler, and player X from the draft this season, and you feel really good about that trio. You have all of these other first-round picks to now use in other trades to improve your core, add to your core, build around your core. That's, to me, the whole point of having these trades. Oklahoma City, with the way that Shea's been playing for them, Giddey and Jalen Williams, and Chet Holmgren, presumably when he comes back next season, they have draft picks to add to their core and improve their team. It's not necessarily about drafting more players. It's about then turning those picks into other players that fit what you already have. And I think Utah is building a really, really good collection of, assets to ultimately at some point flip around and turn into maybe a team that we could arguably see as the next dynasty in the NBA. Now, I think that's, optimistic, but you never really know. Markkanen and Kessler is a really good start. And if they get very lucky in the draft and add a Scoot or Victor, you never really know. And Austin, you know how high I am on both of those guys. They can be franchise-changing players. And something that I definitely think would have a significant impact on the future of the league here. I just want to say thank you to everyone who is in the stream as well. Crazy 700 of you in the stream. Just a reminder, we will be live tomorrow for the NBA trade deadline. Make sure you guys are subscribed to Utility Sports as well. It would be a lot of fun to see you guys in the streams tomorrow. We have a lot of content here at Utility Sports coming out pretty much every single day. So it's a lot of fun. Golja here says, great basketball conversations on this channel. Really appreciate you, Golja. And you guys, you add so much to the channel as well. Austin, you and I, both know how great it is to have the viewers. Austin, what's some of your favorite parts about, hopping in these streams and, getting to talk with our viewers?
Yeah, I think it's more or less the people that have stuck around and been a part of multiple streams and building some of those relationships and just getting to know the viewers that we have. What teams they're fans of, what players that they really like. Those are the big things that we look for in terms of being creators and getting to know you guys. You're a big part of the content. You guys create a lot of our conversations on these streams. And, we always can encourage people to comment and continue to provide that for us, because we want to talk about what you want to hear. So at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do for you.
I do think we have a really great question here to kind of go off of that. Julian wants to know, do you think the Lakers are trading anyone else on the team like Patrick Beverley or anyone else? And if so, for who? Austin, what's kind of your read right now on the Lakers? Specifically, Pat Bev, I think would be the most likely trade, candidate, in my opinion.
Yeah, they're not done, in my opinion. I think there's another deal to be had. I think it's going to be a lower level deal. Patrick Beverley, in my opinion, is gone, and I think he will be moving on. I'm not exactly sure. I mean, who knows? I'm slightly surprised that they didn't try to rework something. Or do we think that it's a real possibility now that Patrick Beverley gets bought out? I mean, is that what we're kind of looking at here? There's been a lot of buyout conversations. Maybe this is the nail in the coffin. Trading for 3 guys that are going to be seeing sizable minutes in their rotation, unlike Toscano Anderson and Damian Jones.
Yeah, right. That's a great question, because again, you did give up some players, JTA, Damian Jones, 2 guys that I don't think really found significant roles there. when you look at Patrick Beverley, I think everyone was really excited about the addition when it first went down for Taylor Horton Tucker. This is kind of funny now because Utah, you think about how active they've been the last year since Danny Ainge really stepped into the building. Think about it. They traded, they made the Joe Ingles trade last year. They've also at certain points gone on to make other moves as well in terms of trading Bojan Bogdanovic. They traded Rudy Gobert, They traded Donovan Mitchell. Then they later on moved the Patrick Beverley, Taylor Horton Tucker trade. And now we see another one here between the Lakers and Jazz. And actually the Jazz call up Minnesota again, where they make a deal with these guys. And we've seen a lot of moves. And that's an important part to remember about the business as well. Usually you see the same teams continue to make trades together because they feel really, really confident in, the relationship that they're building. They feel good about the trades that they make together, and they rely on each other to continue to make trades and continue to improve their team. Van Strife here says gaming plus utility sports stream all day tomorrow equals W. Glad to have that in the chat. Chronicle says I could see the Suns pursuing Russ. That's an interesting little addition that I have not thought of myself up to this point, but definitely something that could be worth keeping an eye on, at least, just given the situation. So according to Chris Haynes, the Bulls are definitely interested now in Russell Westbrook should he secure a buyout. Rocco here says Nuggets need to trade Michael Porter Jr. for somebody like PG or DeRozan and keep Bones. I don't think that's very likely, to be honest. Brady wants to know what's the lineup now for the Lakers with these new guys coming in. I think that they'll start all three of them. That's what I personally would do. I think I would start D'Lo, Beasley, LeBron, Vando, and AD at the center spot, but I could see Vando come off the bench potentially and have, potentially Thomas Bryant in the starting lineup. With the way that he's been playing this year, there's definitely, some warranting of that. You could also argue that maybe Beasley comes off the bench to give you a little bit of scoring punch, and maybe Beverly starts in his place if they keep him. Otherwise, I could also see, maybe Lonnie Walker as a starter. And maybe on some nights, even Austin Reeves. The nice thing is now you can actually say, hey, look, they have a rotation of guys that belong on an NBA court, which you just really couldn't say, 20 hours or, 24 hours ago, a day ago. You just really couldn't, think of that. Curtis wants to know my thoughts on the trade because he's just getting in. Here you go. Here were my trade grades. To be honest, after thinking about it a little bit more, I need to make a change here. I'm going to change this to a B+. For the Minnesota Timberwolves, so I give them a slight bump in this trade. I don't think it's necessarily as bad. If Conley was a little bit younger, it could probably be an A- even. But at 35, it's he's a little old, right, for my liking. But he does give them, in terms of fit, this is exactly what they need. It would have been better if it was a younger version of him, right? That's the only reason I don't love it for them. They traded a 26-year-old for a 35-year-old. But I agree here with Aaron. Conley is a better defender and a lot less careless turnovers. This will help the Wolves. I agree. It's just, again, he's 35. So if you're looking at the long-term outlook, he is 9 years older. So, 9 years from now when D'Lo is 35, Conley will be 44. It's definitely not something that's going to be a long-term fit, but I do think it benefits Rudy Gobert a lot. Conley and Gobert had very good chemistry together in Utah. Part of that blender that Quinn Snyder kind of ran there with the offensive scheme that they had around Gobert with him as a heavy screen assist guy. Conley was the benefactor of that a lot of the time. So I definitely do think it's a positive for them. And Aaron wants to know about the Wolves still going after Bones. I don't really see it. I think that there's a few other teams that are more likely to land Bones. Now, I know the Wolves president, Tim Conley, is the one who drafted Bones Highland, but it doesn't necessarily mean that given the current circumstance, that's the place he ends up, especially when it comes to what does Denver get back from the Minnesota Timberwolves at this point. And, maybe a couple of those second-round picks that they netted today could be involved in that. So I'm not going to rule out a Bones Highland trade back to, a relationship with Tim Connolly and a partnership with the Minnesota Timberwolves. But at the same time, I don't necessarily think it's the lead option either. I think that it's there's potential for it, but it's not necessarily set in stone at this spot for me. Here, Bruce says, wish Vanderbilt would have went to the Blazers. He would have been a nice fit there, but I think the Blazers here are more focused on trading Josh Hart away, potentially to the Dallas Mavericks, who I think are going to be benefited by a wing-type player. I could see him being a pretty good fit. Sweet Jones says, Pacers been playing on the trigger. As for Benedict Mathurin, I really like Benedict Mathurin, but I think, in his current role, the game is working really well for him. Interestingly, again, Pat Bev and D'Angelo Russell are teammates again now in LA, which is kind of funny. It's actually a lot of the team is. It's kind of Los Angeles Timberwolves in a way, which maybe gives Minnesota fans a little bit of fear because of the whole situation with the Lakers leaving Minneapolis. But you see Pat Bev, D'Lo, Beasley, Vando, 4 of the top 8 or 9 guys last year from the Timberwolves roster, now in Los Angeles with AD, with LeBron, of course. So definitely an interesting situation. Jerry here says Utah now has 15 number 1 picks through the next 7 years. Yikes. Yeah, they've got a lot of options to go out and make some trades. John here says OG to the Pacers would be good. I think so as well. I think it would be very beneficial for the Pacers to go out and make a move for him. He fits their timeline. He's young, but most importantly, I don't care about the age as much in terms of the fit. I care about the style and the position and the frame and defensive matchups. OG Anunoby's an elite wing defender, and he's an elite defensive playmaker as well, getting his hands in the passing lane. He's got a very positive wingspan in terms of getting in the passing lanes, being a disruptor on that end of the court. And the Pacers, I think with Halliburton, that's one of the things they're missing. And I think he would be a really nice fit next to Mathurin as well. And Anunoby's one of those perfect wing connectors, which I think is really important. And it would be a really nice fit for the Pacers, who I think are going to be willing to pull the trigger on a deal like that. Mile High says, I wanted the Nuggets to get Vanderbilt now. I don't know who we are getting. For the Nuggets, with Vanderbilt gone, I still wouldn't rule out Matisse Thybulle as well. That's a potential move. We could see a 3-team deal where potentially Thybulle goes to Denver, Bones Highland goes somewhere else, and then maybe the 76ers get a player on, say, the biannual exception or a taxpayer mid-level exception around that $6 million mark that could go help them play some backup center minutes. The name that's going to pop out there is JaVale McGee from the Mavericks. I just don't see the Sixers having interest in that. I would be pretty surprised by that if that's ultimately what went down. Sweet Jones says, I like the Lakers move. It gave them youth and improvement. It definitely helps them long-term if they decide to keep these players. You Are Loved wants to know, when is the trade deadline? The trade deadline is tomorrow, Thursday, February 9th at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So 2 p.m. Central, noon Pacific time, which is a pretty important time. The Lakers, teams on the West Coast got to wake up pretty early that day to get some deals done. It's kind of the benefit of living on the East Coast if you're an East Coast team. Casey here says, any noise on Ayton? As of right now, not a lot of noise on DeAndre Ayton. I would be pretty shocked if he ends up getting traded, just given the nature of his contract. He has the right to veto any trade this year. As a restricted free agent signing and the language in his contract, I do not think Ayton will end up getting dealt. Levi here says, I hope the Heat make a good move. I think there's going to be some options for sure. Rob wants to know about Fred VanVleet getting traded. I think the Clippers are the favorite to get him, but I wouldn't rule out Orlando in that either. Those are the 2 teams to really watch for in a potential deal. Aaron here says Alexander Walker's a younger and cheaper Beasley, so it's a decent trade for the Wolves. Yeah, I just have a little bit of concern about Nikhil's ability to continue shooting at the rate that he has been. I know he has a nice three-point percentage this year. He's shooting very, very well from 3 this season, in fact, at roughly 40% from 3. But he is a career 33% shooter, whereas if you compare that to Malik Beasley, it's very different, right? Malik Beasley's a guy who is a career 38% three-point shooter on higher volume, and the difficulty of his shots are just naturally harder in terms of shooting off the move, off the run. He comes down off of pin downs. He moves off of flares, off of DHOs. He does a good job shooting and getting squared to the rim as well. So, I think that realistically, Nikhil gives them some upside. He's younger, definitely cheaper as well than Beasley. But I don't think it's a bad trade at all for Minnesota. Like you're saying here, I think Minnesota gets contextualized fits that they need. They could still go out as well now with these second rounders and add shooting, which I think would be very beneficial for them. I think that's the one component that they're missing from the team they had last year, where they kind of played a little bit of a running gun system. I think that, they're kind of shying away from that a little bit now with Conley and Gobert, but I still think some components of that would really help this team in terms of getting out and running. And also just when Cat comes back, they are going to have an influx of shooting there because they have one of the best 7-foot big men in terms of perimeter play of all time. So there's definitely some benefits to that there that could make some sense. ATG Rico says, Rick Carlisle says it's very doubtful Pacers make a move. I mean, yeah, he's also the coach. He's not the GM. Now I know he's involved in some of those decisions, but ultimately if something comes around that they like, they'll pull the trigger. You can't trust the coach for anything he's saying. That's the biggest thing. You just have to look at everything honestly, and you have to say, okay, what is he supposed to say to a question like that? Is he supposed to say, oh yeah, we're trading our guys, right? Like that's how you lose the locker room really quick. You can't go out and say something like that in a press conference. Darius says, I think the Kyrie trade will work out for the Mavericks. I hope so. I hope you're right. I don't love it long-term for them. Now, I think he is going to be one of the best talents that Luka ever plays with. But hopefully the off-court stuff just stays under control. And hopefully he sticks around long-term then. Dwayne here says, I like the trades that are going on. Me too. This has been an awesome trade deadline. I hope you guys have been enjoying. It's been a lot of fun today streaming on the channel. It's been absolutely crazy. Joe Mason here says LeBron could mentor D'Lo and he could eventually be a better playmaker for it. I'm not sure how much mentoring LeBron's going to be doing. I just think the expectation is D'Lo comes in and plays well. I don't know if LeBron's going to be sitting there in practice trying to teach all of his guys some stuff. I think the expectation is trying to win right now. Rob says, I'll take D'Lo over Russ any day. I hope so. D'Lo, I think, is a good fit with the Lakers, playing off the ball, off of LeBron. I think that's where the benefit is comparatively to Russ, who just was never going to be a good fit with the Lakers. Kevin here says the potential of John Collins with Halliburton, though. Yeah, I think there's some seriously high potential with that. Of course, Collins very athletic. Halliburton, one of the best ball movers in the NBA. Very, very good passer of the basketball, both off the move and from standstill situations. I love Halliburton. Now we'll see if Collins actually gets dealt. Given the current language of the CBA and the fact that we're going to likely get a newly ratified CBA, I think it would be very unlikely to see John Collins traded. Welcome back to the stream, Austin. Glad to have you back in here. And again, here Jose saying Lakers got a huge win. Austin, out of everything here, do you think the Lakers did really, really well for themselves, just given their current circumstances?
There's not a lot of transactions I've really agreed with in the Rob Pelinka era. However, this is one that makes a lot of sense in my opinion. With what they had to give up and what they're adding this year, you're pushing the chips forward and you're making yourself a lot more competitive to the point where you can make it out of the first round and potentially even win a second round playoff series. Not entirely likely the second round, but I think the first round is a real possibility potentially. The West is really tough, though. In that same vein, there's a lot of teams, at least the first 10 teams really have a shot at making some noise. I think it's very deep. I think it's super well-rounded in terms of what there is to offer, in terms of what certain matchups could be. So them being a playoff team is very realistic, and them even winning a playoff series with LeBron James is not completely out of the realm of possibility. We've seen it before with LeBron and AD. Now you add a guy like D'Lo, who's a much better fit than Russell Westbrook was, and quite frankly, just a better player. Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt add a lot of the depth that they were lacking this entire season.
Right. It definitely is a much improved team now. They're in Los Angeles. The Lakers are way better. They're more connective. I think this is a very good move for the Lakers. Sport and Game here says, oh my gosh, Timberwolves front office and Jazz front office needs to be fired ASAP. And then how come they only gave one first-round pick for Russ or for D'Lo, Vando, and Beasley? It is unfair trade. Please, NBA, investigate. I mean, like, let's think about it here. D'Angelo Russell's an expiring contract. He's now on his, Lakers, Nets, Warriors, Timberwolves. This is his second stint with the Lakers. Realistically, he's been traded 4 times. This is his 5th team now, essentially. Malik Beasley has been on the Nuggets. He's been on the Timberwolves. He's been on the Jazz. Now he's on his 4th team. Same with Vanderbilt. All 4 of those teams. These are guys who've been journeymen. So to give up a first-round pick for guys who, to be honest, were very available this last offseason, I wouldn't say that this is something that Utah or Minnesota should get fired on. This is an example of a guy, a collection of players getting moved at the right time for what makes sense for the organization's direction. Minnesota's trying to win. They get a player that fits with their, best player, in my opinion, and their second best player, in my opinion, when it comes to Ant and Gobert. Conley, I think, suits both of them very well, like he did in Utah with Mitchell, and Gobert. I think Edwards and Gobert is a very similar story. And then for the Utah Jazz, they're in rebuild mode. This gives them a better chance getting toward Victor Wembanyama towards the top of the draft. Again, I think this is a win-win-win trade. Very hard to see those. Minnesota restocks a little bit of draft capital in terms of second-round picks. I usually, when you get to a 3-team deal, I always feel like one team always gets destroyed at the end of the day, because I always feel like when they're talking about 3-team trades, they kind of just forget what's actually going in and out in a deal for like a 1-to-1, and they usually don't keep perspective on that. I actually feel like this one was actually very well executed. Austin, for when it comes to 3-team deals, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think this is a very balanced trade. For the most part, a lot of people are looking at this D'Angelo Russell thing saying, oh, it's just unfair that they were still able to net D'Lo. Yes, but I think the biggest part of it is the fact that it's an expiring deal, which makes all the world of a difference. If there was 2-3 years left on this deal, sure, this might look a little more lopsided, but at the end of the day, with an expiring deal, very, very possible that he ends up getting paid by a team in the offseason, say it's Indiana or whoever it may be, and then then you're looking at Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, a little bit longer term. So at the end of the day, I look at this as a very fair trade. They run the risk of it being expiring. Same thing with, the Dallas Mavericks getting Kyrie Irving. Some people thought that was unfair, actually, in regard to the Mavericks getting him. But with that expiring contract, it's essentially a rental. It's very true for all sports. Rentals are super risky, and for the most part, they actually just don't work out. Now, I don't know what the numbers are if you're to objectively say this or this did not work out. But a lot of times there are situations where it does not work out and they just leave in free agency. I don't know if you deem that fair.
Right, exactly. And that's the risk you run, right? Now, Los Angeles has a little bit of, priority here. They are the Lakers. It's more likely they keep the guys they want to keep, but nothing is guaranteed, especially when it comes to rentals. Now I do want to address something here. That we have 700 people watching. First of all, I'd love for you guys to all hit the subscribe button and also leave a like on the stream. Right now, we're only at 122 likes. I think that's a really low number. I know you guys can do better than that. Please go smash the like button. It would go a long way in showing us that you think that we're doing a good job covering this trade. And also hit that subscribe button if you are new here. I'm sure a lot of you have never seen our streams before. I'm recognizing a lot of names in here, but I'm also seeing a lot of names for the first time as well in the comment section. So please hit that subscribe button. I would really greatly appreciate it. In just a minute here, I will be changing the comment section to subscribers only. So you just have to hit the subscribe button. It's completely free to do that. And then I want to address this comment here from Levi. He says Timberwolves franchise needs to be shut down for trading for Gobert and giving them picks. Here's the one thing I'm going to say about this. If you trade all these picks, the expectation is you win more games than the other team, right? Over the next 4 years, including this year, and let's say the next 4 years, the whole duration of Gobert's contract in Minnesota, I promise you the Minnesota Timberwolves will win more games than the Utah Jazz every single one of those 4 years. Every single year. If we're not basing results of trades on wins and regular season and playoff performance, I don't know what we're doing, to be honest. Like, if the Timberwolves win more games than Utah over the next 4 years and it's not even close, like, there's not really a discussion. I know this year is close. Utah has a very competitive team this year, but there's clearly holes on that team as well, and they're clearly at a spot where they feel like blowing it up is better for them. Minnesota is making a win-now move with this Conley trade. I just think you guys have to consider that winning is really what we're talking about. When you make trades, it's not about, oh, what's your future look like, or, oh, theoretically this could happen down the road. It's literally what happens. And the Minnesota Timberwolves, even when things are falling apart, no Karl Anthony Towns right now, they are still winning more games than Utah. Utah feels like a Cinderella story. Minnesota feels like a nightmare, and the Timberwolves are still better than them. Like, I just think that, you need to consider that when you're talking about who won or lost a trade. Like, people are going to say the Thunder won the trade. Since the trade went down between the Clippers and the Thunder, the Clippers have made a Western Conference Finals. The Thunder have never won a playoff series since the trade went down. Just to be honest with you, I don't understand what we're doing if we're not talking about regular season wins and playoff wins when it comes to who wins and loses trades. Austin, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And looking at it through what this trade is, sure, they gave up a lot, yes. And has the Gobert play been to the expectations of what the Timberwolves thought it was going to be? No, it hasn't. But at the same time, it's only been a couple of months with him being able to play with the current roster that he has. Spent his entire career with Utah and now is coming to a completely different system. Everything is different about this. Nevertheless, you look at the advanced analytics in terms of defensively, how much better they are with him. It's incredible. It's actually incredible. When Towns isn't on the floor, it's just Gobert in a different combination of like McDaniels and a couple of the other key rotational guys like Anthony Edwards and everybody else that fits into like the starting row. They are so much better than they were last year. But once again, people do not want to recognize that. All they're looking at is like the blocks per game. And people are saying that Walker Kessler is better than Rudy Gobert based off of the numbers. It's incredible because I've seen it. I've seen people say this. It doesn't make any sense to me. I understand the blocks per games are not, they're not where people expect them to be, but there is so much more to defense than the actual block and steal number. There is so much more to it. There's positioning, there's boxing out. There's a lot of different things defensively that you have to be good at in order to become a defensive player of the year. Rudy Gobert does the things that people aren't looking at in the box score. A lot of times people don't know how good Rudy Gobert is because nobody cared about watching the Jazz, especially during the regular season, throughout the duration of his career and his defensive player of the year seasons. And now they really don't care. They wanted to see the Wolves struggle. There's for some reason people think that he's an awful player. I don't understand where the narrative is derived off of. But at the end of the day, I think that when you're a team like the Minnesota Timberwolves, you want to push the chips forward. They had to do something. Sure, is Rudy Gobert a top 10 player? No, he's not. Yes, did they give up a lot of picks for him? Yes, but I think at the end of the day, this team is so much better defensively than they were last year, and it's really showing. McDaniels is so much better, defensively this year than he was last year. These guys are making some strides, and if you think about teams that Gobert has had in the past, they've all been top 5 defensive rating teams. And at the end of the day, I think that's very possible for them to essentially reach those heights. And we've already seen like the analytics on him being on the floor with these guys. The defensive ratings are through the roof.
Right, they're just significantly better, and this is the one thing I want to remind people. And if you find if you feel like you're one of those people who think you're looking at blocks per game, and that's your indicator of who's great and who's not, or steals per game, I just want to remind you there's about 80 to 90 possessions a game a lot of the time in the NBA. Maybe a little bit less than that, maybe anywhere from like 70 to 85 possessions per game. If you really think half a block per game more is, dictating who your defensive player of the year is, it just means you're not watching enough basketball. Again, think about it. If a guy's on the court for, 35 minutes, he might be a part of 50 different defensive possessions or even more than that potentially. 1 block or 2 blocks a game is really not that significant. That's 4% of the possessions. It's way more important. Like one thing Brook Lopez does that doesn't get enough love, and Rudy Gobert does this a lot as well, is box out. They keep other centers off the offensive glass. They're a big part of, running a system well. Brook Lopez, Rudy Gobert, the 2 best drop coverage centers in the NBA, in my opinion. And I don't even really think it's close. The rest of the situation is, I understand the stat sheet tells you some things, but it doesn't tell you everything. And you have to watch these players play. And, for the people that are saying Walker Kessler is better than Rudy Gobert, it's just not true. Now, is Walker Kessler fun? Is he an exciting young player? Most definitely. But, like Chaco here talk about like Hassan Whiteside. He was horrible. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. I've been talking for like 16 hours this week already, and I've got 7 more tomorrow. But he was horrible, but he would get blocks, right? With every team. And then, the teams wouldn't actually be that good defensively. Blocks are not a true indicator of the best defensive player. But, some people love to talk about it that way. Austin, I think you nailed it with your analysis on that. And Robert here saying a lot of people don't probably don't. Rudy gave everyone who works in the Target Center a Christmas bonus. Yes, he did. It's very nice gesture by him for the new team that he's on. Levi said, you need some tea after the stream. I do. It's a little bit of a struggle here. Like, Austin, you take over for a minute. I'm going to go get a drink real quick.
I'm going into takeover mode. So, yeah, I mean, kind of looking at that and talking about a little bit more of this trade, I think holistically speaking, we are seeing an even trade across the board for the most part. Lakers probably come out ahead on it. Utah Jazz are doing exactly what they need to do. I'm pretty excited to look at how this trade pans out for every single one of these teams. And we talked a lot about the Timberwolves. We talked a lot about the Lakers and what they can be. Now, the real question is, what's going to happen with the Utah Jazz situation? The Utah Jazz situation, we look at Russell Westbrook, Damian Jones, and Juan Toscano-Anderson, plus that first-round pick. Now, when you look at Russell Westbrook in the buyout market, this is something that's intriguing to me. It doesn't shock me that the Clippers are going to be looking into, signing Russell Westbrook if he's bought out. You have the Chicago Bulls, who have already showed a lot of interest here with that whole situation. So Bulls, Clippers, there's going to be some other teams that get in on this. I'm kind of curious to see who. I think it's going to be a couple of teams that are borderline playoff teams that very well could find themselves in a position to, get some bench scoring punch with Russell Westbrook. I think that the narrative out there about him being a really, really bad player is a little misleading. I think it's a little bit of a misnomer when you look at the actual, statistics and everything. Sure, I mean, him beyond the arc, yeah, that's not a shot that you want. But at the end of the day, the amount of pressure he puts on a rim is not necessarily shown in the stat sheet either. I mean, his ability to get to the rim and force guys to really, collapse the defense creates other opportunities for other players. And that's something that cannot be stated enough. That's why I think the fit with the Clippers would make the most sense. The ability to actually apply pressure to the rim and have some of your guys spot up and shoot. Because that team with Russell Westbrook, in my opinion, is much better than if you have Reggie Jackson out there. Reggie Jackson is a shot maker, does not necessarily apply a ton of pressure to that rim, creating other big opportunities for guys, which, once again, people are going to say, oh, well, how come it didn't work in LA? It's just because that team was a clunky fit to begin with LeBron and AD and Russ and the other pieces they've put around him. To me, this Clipper team is the perfect transition from, where he was at with the Lakers to, at that point, not having to be one of those guys. He can just be a role player that just does his thing. Now there won't be those same expectations he had in LA. Obviously, they make the big splashy trade to go get him. Now he's playing for that, quote, other LA team. A lot of people don't really care about Clipper basketball in LA. Now he's getting to fly completely under the radar for the first time in his entire career, which has not been the case. Those expectations being lifted off of the shoulders, they're going to be playing with house money at that point, the Clippers and Russell Westbrook. Therefore, I think will be a nice ebb and flow in terms of his transition over to the other team. Now, I think when you kind of look at it, the Clippers are going to be in. You have the Bulls that are going to be in. There's going to be some other teams that are in on him potentially. What are your thoughts on the Sacramento Kings?
I don't know if I love Sacramento for him, just because I do like Davion Mitchell as an option for them still off the bench. And they found a rhythm with Malik Monk kind of being that bench scoring punch as well. So given their circumstances, I just don't think that Russ really is the guy I would look for them. If anything, I think that they need a little bit more defense in terms of, wing defenders. I think Matisse Thybulle is the perfect addition for that team. I do just want to highlight here Josh's comment as well. You need some water or tea, dude. Your voice is disappearing like Harden in the playoffs. I do think that's an all-time comment there. I love James Harden, but that's a pretty funny one to leave in the comment section. Dylan here wants to know, do the Lakers flip Patrick Beverley plus Lonnie Walker plus a first-rounder for someone like Gary Trent Jr., Boyan, or look to add to their front court? I think this is a really great question, and this leads us into what's left for the Lakers to trade. They still have that 2029 first that they could now deal as well, which is definitely a good option for them. Austin, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at that, I think that is on the table yet if they're looking to, because what this trade is telling me is the fact that they are going for it this year. You trade for a guy that's on an expiring deal as the main piece in the trade. Therefore, I think they're pushing the chips forward. I think another trade is coming for the Lakers. Now, whether or not that they traded another first round pick is yet to be seen. However, I think it's very realistic that, Lonnie Walker, Patrick Beverley are going to be the two pieces, a part of the current rotation that could get dealt. I think it's a very realistic situation. I'm kind of curious to see, Gary Trent Jr., Bogdanovich, two of those guys are interesting fits with this team. I don't know how you feel about the players themselves, but the compensation in terms of what was proposed makes a lot of sense to me in terms of if they're actually going to go all in. That's their next framework of a deal.
Yeah, I think so as well. And for me, if I'm making a trade here for Bojan, I'm not willing to give up both Beverly and Lonnie Walker just because I want to keep some backcourt depth for myself. So I think, maybe the framework looks a little bit more like Pat Bev plus, two of those guys on minimums to make the money work. And then that first round pick for a guy like Bojan, if you can get to that spot. Do the Pistons really want Lonnie Walker given, the fact that long-term they have Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey? I don't think that Lonnie Walker becomes a point of stipulation in a deal like that. Now, I think Bojan would be a really nice fit. I don't think Gary Trent Jr. is a bad fit either. I do want to thank Venkata here for becoming a member. It's a very helpful way to support the channel. Helps us continue to make live streams like what we do here. And I hope you guys have been enjoying. I know Robert, who's been watching the channel for a really long time, he has been enjoying everything we do. Here he says hit that like button. Really appreciate that. Make sure you guys all follow his idea here. And let's get to Venkata, our newest member, what he's saying here. Do you think Clippers will land a point guard and a backup center tomorrow, Austin, in the same deal? Clippers are under pressure now to make a move for Van Vliet. What's your thoughts on that?
The Clippers are going to land a point guard, whether that be the trade market or the buyout market. In my opinion, backup center is also priority. I've heard that there's been some talks about Isaiah Hartenstein being shipped back to the Clippers. We remember how effective they were on the defensive end with Isaiah Hartenstein, which was kind of a surprise, a guy that was nearly out of the league and became a key rotational guy for a team that was thought to be a true contender. Obviously did not work out last year. Hartenstein, his absence has actually meant a lot to this team. They need to go ahead and address that backup center. I think Nerlens Noel is another name that we have to watch in the trade market. Very well could be a formidable backup center option. And in terms of the point guard spot, I think Van Vliet is, at the end of the day, going to be the guy that the Clippers acquire. He is very, very closely associated with Kawhi Leonard. You think back to the championship run. You think about Norman Powell as well. This is going to be the point guard they acquire, in my opinion.
Right. Casey Wood here with the 5. He says, did Orlando make any trades today at the NBA trade deadline? They have not made one yet, but reminder, tomorrow is actually the day of the NBA trade deadline. We've had some, build up here the last couple of days. We've had some crazy moves, including Kyrie Irving, now Russell Westbrook, D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, Vando, and Mike Conley all get dealt. So there's been a lot of moves. Orlando's not done anything yet, Casey, but make sure you stick around for tomorrow's live stream where I'm gonna, cover every single trade that goes down. And
let's talk about the Magic quick and what they have to offer. What are some of the pieces that are currently up for discussion? I think you have to start with Mo Bamba as being the primary headliner for this team. Obviously, with the resurgence of Bol Bol, this kind of makes it a little interesting for Mo Bamba. Mo Bamba, in terms of when he was coming out, was one of the most exciting players in the entire class. A guy that's his ceiling was incredible. Now we see kind of after a couple of years in the NBA, it has not worked out in his favor. I think they're a little guard heavy in terms of, consolidation seems inevitable at this point. Jonathan Isaac seems like he's another guy that'll get moved. There's a lot going on with the Magic, and I think they have some interesting pieces that could shake up the deadline. Who is the most likely to get dealt out of that group?
I think Mo Bamba, like you highlighted, I think Gary Harris, who's having a very, very good season for himself, shooting 43% from three. It feels like one of the biggest outliers compared to where he was, a couple of years ago back in Denver. I think that there's some guys there that they can move. Terrence Ross, another name to watch for. And they're another team, again, in on Van Vliet. If the Clippers don't get Fred Van Vliet, my guess is that he lands with Orlando. So that's really the team to watch, in my opinion. Thank you for the $5. Again, very helpful in supporting the channel and helping us continue to do what we're doing here in terms of content and live streams throughout the entire trade deadline week here. Look Alive here became a YouTube member as well, so really appreciate you. Look Alive, awesome having your support. Really do appreciate you guys coming out and supporting the channel the way that you do. It's really, really appreciated in a way that, we can't state it enough, honestly. Wesley here says, I'm thinking Russ is going to be much more productive with Utah. The Jazz are going to be fun to watch. Ultimately, I don't think Russ plays a game with Utah. I think he's going to actually get bought out, Wesley, and then he'll end up on another team, preferably, in my opinion, the Clippers, although the Bulls and his potential reunion with Billy Donovan does, from a business perspective, at least make some sense in terms of those relationships, like we talked about earlier. Unspoken here says, I don't think OG Anunoby's getting traded anymore because we haven't heard anything about him in forever. Is he even on the board? And Austin, this is a great question. OG Anunoby's kind of like the linchpin player of this trade deadline, where teams like the Pelicans, the Grizzlies, the Pacers, a bunch of teams, even the Nets, I would say now, would have interest in acquiring him. One thing I'm going to say here, and Austin, I want to get your thoughts on this too. Just because you haven't heard anything yet doesn't mean there's not anything coming. Think about D'Angelo Russell. 5 hours ago, 6 hours ago, I was live on the channel and we hadn't heard anything yet about anything. And then all of a sudden, within 4 or 5 hours, a deal is done. So we're still, at this point, I believe about 17 hours away from the trade deadline. There is a ton of time for a deal to, kind of come to fruition. What do you think about OG here with that, Austin?
I think it's still on the table, to be completely transparent, because of how the Raptors have kind of shifted their thoughts and their process here. It appears that we are going to see some of the key components of the team get stripped, with Gary Trent being on the table, OG Anunoby, Fred VanVleet, a little sprinkling of Pascal Siakam, which I don't deem that entirely realistic that he gets moved. Nevertheless, there are 3 guys that continuously get mentioned in trade talks. The Raptors have a lot to do between now and the deadline. I don't think it's enough time to necessarily get to where they want to be, unless they have some deals really lined up at this point moving on. I think we might only see one deal out of them.
Right. I think that's a good point too. But, again, the timing is just, it's an important thing to remember here. Venkata with the $10. So not only joining as a member, but also a $10 donation here from Venkata. You've been in the live streams all week long, so I really appreciate you. I hope you've been enjoying the content this week. And again, asking about the Clippers and, backup center. We kind of addressed that a little bit, Austin. Let's touch on that a little bit more. You talked about Nerlens Noel. Let's say potentially there is no Fred VanVleet move here, and maybe Russell Westbrook goes to the Bulls in free agency. What's the kind of like, oh no, we don't really have a point guard for the playoffs solution in your eyes for the Clippers this season?
Oh, that's really tough. I mean, if they're not able to walk away with one of those 2 guys, which have been the primary trade targets, D'Angelo Russell was another name that was on the board for the Clippers. So if that is, essentially you're down to your 4th option at that point, in my opinion. You got to kind of think about who are some of the other sellers at this point in time. It's tough. It's really tough to pinpoint a team that's ready to fully move on from a point guard. I'm just kind of thinking around the NBA, some of the bottoming out teams. I mean, does Trey Jones become available, from San Antonio? I think that's an option that actually hasn't really been floated out there quite often. However, maybe they capitalize on how he's playing. I mean, maybe you kind of look around the association. A couple of other guys, I'm struggling here. I mean, maybe Kevin Porter Jr. is another one that we have to consider. The guard play hasn't been terrific from Houston. I think that's very likely that one of their guards get moved. I think Kevin Porter Jr. could be the odd man out.
Right, maybe even a small move like DeLon Wright could definitely go a long ways as well, or Markelle Fultz, like Brady Thompson here is saying, too, as a potential option, like we highlighted earlier. Look Alive with the $20. Didn't even attach a comment with it, just dropping $20 for us, just like that. Look Alive says, now he adds to that as well. Let's get this comment on there as well. Look Alive, really appreciate you. $20 goes a really long way in terms of helping support the channel, and every donation is really, really appreciated. Says, was on the fence, but you won me over in the past few days / years. Thought I'd pull the trigger and support. If you want to talk Rockets, you can. But all good. Let's talk about the Rockets, Austin. You talk about Kevin.
I'm here for it. H-Town right here.
He's rocking the H-Town. I like it. I cheer for the Rockets a little bit too. Even though I'm a Mavs fan, I've got a little bit of that Houston Rockets red blood inside of me. So Austin's going to take that and use that against me later, I know, but
yeah, that's bad. Now it's caught on stream, by the way.
Yeah, that's not good. Someone's going to clip it. But anyway,
let me talk to the viewers quick. Now, we need to make sure that during the duration of these live streams that we are clipping what Sheldon has to say and use that against him later on. So we can collectively get that in a group. We are going to be starting a Discord as well. So keep that in mind. We're going to want to be interacting with you more and more. We're going to be talking about, potentially we even could get this lined up tonight. We want to be talking about the deadline in our Discord. We want to talk a lot of different things. We want to get to know you guys better outside of the streaming hours. Obviously, that can't last forever. I mean, Sheldon Slongs only have so much capacity, at a certain point. So you've already seen it. The guy's breaking down, at this point. Now, looking at the Rockets, I think the Rockets are in a position where they have to question what's the next move. Now, they have a lot of talented young players. At this point, are you going to move on from some of the veterans? Now, there's not a ton of the veterans that are currently on roster, but one of them that I want to highlight exclusively is Eric Gordon. There's been a lot of rumors to a couple of the contending teams about, potentially acquiring Gordon. The Clippers have been a name that's been heavily mentioned in the reacquisition of the one-time former Clipper. Is he a guy that gets moved? We've been saying it for a couple years, and it just hasn't happened. I think this is the year he gets dealt.
I think so too. I like that as a move for them. There's also some rumors about Jayshawn Tate potentially getting traded. Now, from Houston's perspective, I think if you can get any type of asset for either of those guys, I do think it's very beneficial for them long term. Now, I know, the idea right now is add veteran leadership into Houston. I think that they have pathways to do that in free agency where you don't have to give up any assets to get there. So look alive. I hope that, you feel like you've gotten what you wanted to hear about the Rockets a little bit. And tomorrow we're going to cover them a lot more. I think there's going to be some activity from them tomorrow. So make sure you stop into tomorrow's live stream and just, throw a comment in and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or maybe you can even send some trades to us on Twitter as well. Everyone should go follow us on Twitter right now @_utility sports. Link is in the description for that. Go ahead and follow on there. Brett with $10 as well. Thank you so much, Brett. Again, the donations go a really long way in helping us continue to, make content here on the channel, continue to live stream like we are. And he says, I appreciate the work that you consistently put in. Your efforts show in your content. I hope you appreciate it. I've been working my my vocal cords into smithereens this week, but I feel like it's been worth it. I've had a lot of fun interacting with all of you guys. I know Austin does as well when he's got the opportunity to do it. So Austin, what do you have to say to Brett as well?
Yeah, no, it's really great. I mean, Sheldon's doing a really good job on these live streams, and unfortunately, I'm not able to join him during the deadline time. But just remember, I'm still watching the Twitter, still seeing what you guys are commenting, also in those lives. So just keep that in mind. It's a lot of fun. Sheldon covers a lot of that NBA. I handle more of the NFL in MLB, so we make that work. But if you're looking for an NBA guru, this is the guy here. I'm one of those, tertiary options when it comes to the NBA.
Austin's our primary playmaker. I'm Kyrie, and he's Doncic. I just wanted to be clear. And talking about Luka Doncic level performance, Venkata has gone crazy today with arguably
he's heating up.
With arguably the biggest donation. I would lose my mind if it was honestly any bigger, because that's $50 is incredible, Venkata, and I really, really do appreciate it. Me and Austin both. Absolutely incredible. So thank you so much for that. Honestly, you deserve a lot of love, not only for joining as a member today, but also all of your donations and just all of your awesome comments as well. I love seeing your guys' comments, even when they're not donations. But the donations, of course, pop up with these bright, awesome colors. We get to put them on the screen, hype you up a bit. Let's get some Venkata hype in the chat. Everyone spam Venkata right now. Let's get some hype for Venkata in the chat. Venkata wants to know, Austin, Terry Rozier or Fred VanVleet most likely trades tomorrow, and Reggie Jackson for Christian Wood. What's your thought on Reggie for Wood? And then also Terry Rozier, an underrated option, one that I think we should talk about here for the Clippers quite a bit.
Yeah, so let's hit on the Reggie Jackson for Christian Wood. So obviously the main parameters are that's not going to work a 1-for-1, but the idea of that being the framework, I don't think is completely out of the realm of possibility with them having to give up other assets. I think the Clippers would have to include a guy like Brandon Boston or potentially Amir Coffey, or the combination of maybe both of them, which are two guys that they really like on the end of their bench. However, I think if they're trying to push the chips forward, which they probably should, in Kawhi's prime, Paul George's prime, it makes a lot of sense. You're looking for a really good scoring big that's going to make a big difference for this team. Now, my question is, are the Dallas Mavericks prepared to make a deal like that, in the idea that they're going for it too? Because you have to consider, on the Mavericks perspective, they just traded for a quote rental. Unless they feel like they're getting better than what Christian Wood is currently, I don't know that they would be able to make a move like that. unless, maybe the Clippers send a couple seconds with it. It's a tough trade to kind of navigate. Yes, Reggie Jackson would be kind of intriguing for them in terms of, getting another scoring, guard off the bench, which I think there is some value in it. Now, Terry Rozier versus Fred VanVleet. That's a conversation we have to talk about because Terry Rozier is a name we have not mentioned all night. We have not mentioned Terry Rozier's name. Let's talk about him a little bit. Let's talk about the likelihood. I think Fred VanVleet is probably an 85% chance to get traded. I don't know if you feel the same way. I feel heavily about that. 85 is a strong number and a bold proclamation, but in that same vein, I think he's going to get dealt. Terry Rozier, that's kind of interesting. That's not a name that's been floated around a ton in league circles that I've heard. I don't know, Sheldon, maybe you've heard a little bit different, but I think he's a realistic option to get moved as well.
Yeah, I think the Hornets are one of those sneaky, quiet teams right now where, they have Hayward. Now, not that that's a very valuable player or valuable contract right now, but for, a league that's desperate for wings who can, pass, shoot, and dribble, he does those things, right? So Hayward's kind of a sleeper, although the contract's negative. It's not great, but it's an option. Kelly Oubre is on an expiring. He's, again, another sleeper wing option out there that I think some team will probably buy on. And then also Terry Rozier. Again, if we're thinking about this from the Clippers perspective, you're not really trading defense. Rozier is pesky, very quick-footed. He's able to pick up 94 feet when you want him to. Those are all benefits that Reggie Jackson doesn't give you. And he's also very quick twitch in a way that, again, Reggie Jackson isn't. He can get paint touches, which is very important for guards around a 5-out offense to be able to get into the paint, force rotations. We saw that against the Utah Jazz years ago when they, played Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell basically out of Utah. Was the beginning of the end before Danny Ainge was hired there. Rozier could do that at a higher level than Reggie Jackson as well. So, this is a great comment. Again, Venkata, we really appreciate you. And I think Rozier's a really good sleeper option and one that we probably should have mentioned earlier, honestly. And let's get some of that Venkata hype in here. We've seen some awesome comments from all of our viewers.
Love you.
Like, honestly, our comment section is undefeated. You guys are the absolute best on YouTube. It's incredible, the support, the knowledge you guys have that you bring into the streams. You guys share a lot of great ideas with us, just like how Venkata just did about Terry Rozier to the Clippers.
Sure.
You guys are the best. So I really do appreciate you guys. And then Look Alive here as well. Of course, one of our newest members says, no doubt I'll be there tomorrow. Was all in on utility sports for a couple of years. Just finally decided to support. You guys deserve it. Keep it up. Really appreciate that. Look Alive. I love the fact that you've been, supporting for years. Again, there's never any pressure to donate, but they're always super appreciated. And the fact that you joined as a member as well, it does go a long way, again, like I said, in supporting the channel. But even, your time viewing the videos that we post, I just really appreciate every little bit that you guys all do for us when it comes to, watching our content, checking out our mock drafts, watching some of our trade guides, those kind of things. Really appreciate that. And Look Alive here even adds in, especially your draft coverage. I try really hard in that. That's my favorite thing to record on the channel. So I really appreciate it. And here even hypes up Venkata himself a little bit, saying he's the OG. Most definitely is. Austin, here's an idea I want to hear, but Chaco says, Alex Caruso to the Clippers for a first and a second and Amir Coffey. What's your initial reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, I like Alex Caruso, the fit there. Now, with the remaining assets, I'm not exactly sure that they would be able to necessarily swing that. I think in terms of an actual fit, that would be phenomenal. Amir Coffey's a nice bench player for them to receive, but at the end of the day, I just don't know with the little remaining assets they have in terms of draft capital if they would be able to pull off something like that. Kind of an interesting idea, though. I didn't really consider that one. So a very top tier comment there. I'm going to kind of sit and think on that one a little bit because that is something that could definitely make them better in the short term.
Yeah, I like that for them defensively. Here is funny. Jeff Strohs says, I don't mean to sound rude, but your friend's wearing a Rockets jersey with a Rangers hat. He said H-Town pride, but he's wearing a Rangers hat. I know you're a Rockets fan here, Jeff Strohs, so you might want to cover your ears, but we're not banging on any trash cans here in this live stream. So, I'm just playing with you. Don't take it too serious. I'm just messing around. But ITK here.
Jeff's got to call me out. That was warranted, man. That was definitely warranted. I totally did deserve that. So No disrespect to your H-Town. I'm not an actual Rockets fan. I just got a Harden jersey on with my Red Rangers hat.
Yeah, he's a huge Harden fan, if you guys didn't know.
Remotely.
Did you guys know he bought that jersey for himself?
That's congratulations.
He did. Honest to God. Chaos here says, I suppose Vando's no longer looking at Dallas loss. Unfortunately not. Here, Wesley has a great question about the Thunder, and this is going to be probably one of our last questions that we answer, unless there's any more donations that come in that we have to thank. But as for Wesley, do you think the Thunder should do anything at the deadline to add some front court depth, or should they just be patient and wait? One really important thing, and I've been talking about this for the last couple of days now, but I know, Wesley, I think you're new in here today. The Thunder are actually one of the few teams in the NBA that's over the salary cap, over the luxury tax threshold. So because of that, they would be, classified as a tax team, and they would not get any benefits from being outside of the tax, which means massive money for their owner and massive money for their organization. Because of that, they will definitely make a trade. The player I see them trading is likely Darius Bazley. They will send him to a team like the Spurs, who have cap space to get out of the luxury tax, so that way they can save a lot of money. It's a very niche thing in the CBA, and it's something that when you're making fake trades, you have to consider that. That's one of the most important rules. Miami, you think about the trade that they made with Dwayne Dedmon and a second rounder going to San Antonio for cash. The reason for that is to help them get out of the luxury tax as well and save some money. The Thunder are going to do a very similar trade. Now they're going to give up a younger player in Darius Bazley. They likely probably won't have to attach a second round pick with it, but they will send him to San Antonio, where maybe he gets a shot to jumpstart his career. But with everything, there's all these niche little situations that go down. Jeff says, someone tell Austin I said go Astros and that he's wearing the wrong hat. Go Rockets too. All right. I like it, Jeff. You're bringing some of that Houston hype into the comment section. ITK says Blockbuster, ESPN trading Mel Kiper to Utility Sports for Sheldon. Somehow Utility Sports ends up way better. They'd have the two best draft gurus in the NFL. Oh my gosh. Austin's taking a picture of that. Nice. Well, thank you. Oh my gosh, we have another trade. Another trade.
Whoa.
The Trailblazers are trading Josh Hart to the New York Knicks. Austin, I'm going to have you cover this here as I catch my breath for a quick second. I will get that up on the stream right now.
Oh, boy.
But we do have a trade. We have a breaking news trade. Austin, I'm going to update the stream here.
Yep. I will take care of this.
Let me get this refreshed here, and then you go ahead and you jump on the content here for Josh Hart to New York.
Yeah, so Josh Hart going to the Knicks. Now, if this isn't the most Tom Thibodeau guy of all time, I don't know who is, because he's a hard-nosed player. He's a guy that skies for rebounds, and he is one of the best rebounding guards / quote forwards that you're going to see in the league. Some people classify him as guard. Sometimes he's classified as a forward. Josh Hart, I think, is exactly what the New York Knicks need. They need a little bit more rebounding, especially from the guard position. Josh Hart gives them that. I'm kind of curious on compensation. Are we looking at, another pick? We're going to try to get some of that comp pulled up here, because this is big. This is really, really big.
I wouldn't rule out Cam Reddish in this deal as well. I think Cam Reddish is likely headed to Portland real quick. Austin, you continue to talk about this, but I just wanted to throw a little 2 cents.
Sheldon's going to die now, clearly. I mean, this trade just sent him through a loop. What is happening? Now, the fact that Josh Hart's going there, Cam Reddish, who had completely fallen out of favor with Tom Thibodeau, is likely going to the Blazers. I kind of like this for the Blazers. They tend to take chances on some of these wings with some high upside. Think Nazir Little. Think Cam Reddish. Think Keon Johnson as another one. This team is building for upside, and I don't necessarily blame them. Now, trading Josh Hart away to the Knicks is intriguing, with Cam Reddish being the main piece probably coming back. I'm kind of curious to see, what ends up happening here, what transpires. I wish I had a little bit more details on that, but we're going to have to kind of wait. So kind of let me know in the comments section what you're thinking on this kind of deal, because Josh Hart, let me go ahead and pull up his numbers so far this year. I mean, he's played pretty well for the Trailblazers. So let me just pull up his actual stats currently. So this year he's averaging 9.5. He's got 8 rebounds a game. Keep in mind, he's 6'5", and he's averaging 8 boards a game. That's incredible. He's not shooting particularly well from 3, only about 30% clip. Last year for Portland, he had shot 37% from 3. Overall, assists per game is hanging around 4, steals per game 1.1, blocks per game 0.2, turnovers per game is down from last year, which is nice. He's just not averaging the same scoring output that he had in 2021 and 2022. A little bit, from that point in time. Because with Portland last year in 13 games, he was averaging nearly 20. With the Pelicans last year, he was averaging 13.4. So he's more or less kind of in between that grouping. So Josh Hart on his way to the Knicks. I'm kind of looking forward to see what the actual compensation ends up being. Still kind of awaiting for those results here. See what Shams has got to say about that one. But I'm kind of curious to see what ends up happening. With this deal, are there going to be some second round picks involved? Is it going to be pretty close to a 1-for-1 swap? Cam Reddish is a player that has extremely high upside, and we remember from his time during the draft, there was always the what ifs. What can he turn into? What is his ceiling? And he hasn't hit that. And I think part of that is due to a lack of opportunity. If I'm being completely transparent, I think part of that lack of opportunity. A lot of people do like him. I think there's still a chance for him to gain a role with Portland and excel. He was just never a Tom Thibodeau guy. He's never been a Tom Thibodeau guy. And looking at that, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense for him to continue to sit on the bench for that team and to kind of rot, per se, with that rotation. Tom Thibodeau has his 8 guys that he likes. This has been the case in Chicago. It's been the case in Minnesota, and now in the case for the Knicks. Evan Fournier has completely fallen out of favor for him as well, which is another guy that is not a, quote, Tibbs guy. So as long as Tibbs is coach, he's still going to have the extremely short rotations, high minutes for his rotational guys. To me, here we go. We do have that compensation. If Sheldon's able to come back and get us back in here, that would be huge, because I will just read out the compensation of currently how it's listing right now. It appears to be that the Knicks are trading Cam Reddish in a protected future first-round pick to the Blazers for Josh Hart. This is sizable compensation for a guy like Josh Hart, in my opinion. Looking at him, he's a good quality rotational player. I just don't know what the protections are going to be on that pick. It's got to be somewhat protected. I don't know how I feel about that necessarily. For the Knicks having to give that up. Once again, that could hurt some, overall flexibility. And I don't know. I have some concerns. But if you're talking about a player that fits in with the system and exactly what a player's expecting, or what Tom Thibodeau is expecting out of the player, Josh Hart is literally the perfect fit for this team and exactly what they were looking for, what they needed. Cam Reddish being traded away, they're taking the L on their initial trade, getting him from Atlanta. Now he's on his way to the Trailblazers. So Trailblazers have a nice young core, some interesting players with some high upside. Keon Johnson, Cam Reddish. Those are some intriguing players. And overall, I think they are kind of making the steps in the right direction in terms of trying to load up on some future talent. Meanwhile, they're trying to also be competitive. So Josh Hart ends up netting a protected first, which is pretty surprising. This is a surprising deal, in my opinion. I like it from the fact that I think Portland does pretty well in this one. I'm trying to seek out additional details in terms of what the protections are. Still kind of waiting for that news to arise here for us. This could be a big deal in terms of what those protections are, and will kind of entirely, change the perspective of what this trade could be. It really depends if that doesn't convey what is it going to be. Is it just going to be another first? Is it going to be 2 seconds? I don't know. Sometimes the protections are weird on some of these outlier trades, because at face value, you say Josh Hart for a first in this market, you're saying probably no way that happens. Well, now it's for a protected first, maybe a heavily protected first, which is something that you have to consider at this juncture. So overall, this is something that, honestly, Blazers fans should be excited about.
Yeah, definitely crazy awesome. Thank you for covering that real quick. I was updating the thumbnail, updating the stream as well, as well as getting some stuff set up here so that I had the Clippers Mavs game on as well, just in the background, because of course, as we were about to end the live stream again, a crazy trade goes down. And my thoughts on this here, Austin, for the most part, I agree with everything you said too. Interestingly enough here, the Knicks, again, like you said, pivoting off of Reddish, basically a year after trading for him. Clearly that was an L. This fits the Blazers' MO of trading for an athletic, unproven, not very good wing. They love to do that. They like guys who can jump but not really play basketball. Cam Reddish kind of fits that description a little bit. He's not very good. And I think this begins a little bit of selling that I thought Portland could have been liable to do. You remember today I was talking about that as a team that could be a surprise seller. Josh Hart is one of those guys that's realistically could be on the move this deadline, and he was ultimately to the New York Knicks. And the reason why, so he has 2 years, or he has 1 year left on his deal, but that year is a very weird year. He has a player option at $12 million, which is not that bad. But the interesting spot about that is with that $12.96 million cap hit, it is non-guaranteed, fully non-guaranteed. So it would be not smart for him to opt in. So basically this is a rental potentially for the New York Knicks as well. And now they do have a lot of draft assets, so they're not going to really miss that first rounder. My guess is it could be the one from the Detroit Pistons. They also own a bunch of other first round picks as well. But just given the situation, again, Hart and Brunson, back to the Villanova days, yes, that's true. He was one of the better wings available, especially defensively in terms of rebounding. Austin, I know you mentioned the 8 rebounds a game right now. He's been dominant as a rebounding wing. That's really kind of his calling card in the NBA, honestly. I was kind of hoping the Mavericks would find a way to land him. Of course, they did not end up getting there to a spot where they could find a deal for him. But ultimately, things did not quite work out in that way. Austin Venkata here, $2 as well, says Clipper prediction they will land Fred and Wood. So that's a strong prediction, Austin. If you had to give a likelihood for that, what would you say?
In terms of your scale 1 to 10, I think that's probably hanging the 6 or 7 in terms of acquiring both. I think acquiring one, more or less stands at 8 to 9, and more or less the idea that they're going to get Van Vliet. So in my opinion, it's probably a likely outcome that they at least get one of them. Bold prediction that they would get both, but at the end of the day, I think it's very possible. This is an aggressive team. They've always been aggressive at the deadline, and I don't think anything changes this year.
Right. Here, David says, seems bad to me, and I really like Hart. It depends on what that pick ends up being. I think, Austin, you did a great job as well with kind of your thoughts on that. Like, we don't really know which pick. I'm speculating here based on what I know that the New York Knicks have. But ultimately, they have Dallas's first this year as well. They have Detroit's this year, which is, lottery protected. So if you give up something like that, conveys into those 2 seconds, like you mentioned, or, ends up getting pushed out for a couple of years, it's not terrible, especially with where the Knicks are in the NBA standings right now. They're 7th in the Eastern Conference. They're actually tied with the Heat, though, for 6th. So there's a good chance, too, that, if Brooklyn takes a step back here, they're only 3 games back of Brooklyn. They could maybe even move into 5th. They're 4 games back of Cleveland, which I think is a little bit harder to see them jumping up to. But possible, it could be possible as well. So Kyrie Irving right now is stepping out onto the court for the first time as a Dallas Maverick as well. We will be concluding the live stream here. But again, let's just get our concluding thoughts here, Austin. Give me your trade grade for this deal for the Knicks, even though we don't have all the details right now. Let's just say it's a lightly or a fairly protected first round pick and Cam Reddish for this deal. What's your thoughts?
I'm going to go ahead and give the Blazers a B+ on this one. I don't like Cam Reddish, the player. I think there's some upside, but at the end of the day, the big net is the first round pick that's protected. So I'm going to give them a B+ on the end of the Knicks. I think this is more or less going to hang around that C+ range. Just for the fact, I think Josh Hart's a good player in a perfect scheme fit. However, I don't like what they had to give up. Cam Reddish, that doesn't matter to me. That does not move the needle at all. But the idea that they had to give up a protected first, and once again, we don't know what the protections are. We don't know what it conveys if it doesn't hit, the first year of that draft. I think at the end of the day, that's probably a C+ to a C trade in terms of overall what it should be.
Right. And for me here to conclude today, of course, as soon as we end the live stream, another big trade will happen. Just knowing how the nature of the beast has been this season for me. But my trade grade here, I give the Blazers a B. Had Hart had a little bit more length on his contract, feasible length that he would have been on this team, probably could have seen that go a little bit higher. I also, kind of factor in a little bit of sunk cost of giving up a first round pick last year for Cam Reddish. Clearly that did not work out. So you could look at it in a way that they've given up now 2 first rounders for Josh Hart. Obviously, you know, that's not really the way that you should look at things, but it's kind of the reality of the situation. We talked about that as well with D'Lo earlier on, where they, you know, gave up Wiggins and the rights basically to Kuminga as well. And then for the next year, I give them a B as well. Excuse me. I gave all my points for the Knicks. Excuse me. But for the Blazers, I give them a B. Getting an asset, I think, is a positive for them. They don't have very many tradable firsts right now. So you at least add something to your, treasure chest of picks. And, Cam Reddish is a nothing for me in this deal. But, with the fact that Josh Hart was likely leaving in free agency, I think this is an okay outcome for them. And, I don't really think this moves the needle one way or another. But, the Knicks get another guy in their rotation that they like. Evan Fournier is definitely a guy who's going to get traded, I would think. And it gives the Blazers here now an asset to play with as well at the trade deadline to maybe make another move or maybe stand pat and then try and build around in the offseason around you can tell my brain's mush from all the streaming the last 4 days, obviously around Damian Lillard. Venkata says, thank you guys so much for everything. Really appreciate you, Venkata. Let's get a little bit more Venkata hype in the chat right here before we end the live. I'm going to get us started here with my own Venkata message. Let's go ahead, get some hype down there in the comment section right now. Would love to see you guys hype up Venkata one last time. And we're going to get off the stream here now as Dallas is up 6-3 early in this game against the Clippers. Austin, you and I are going to be having a fun time battling that one out. You as a Clippers fan, me as a Mavs fan. But really appreciate you guys, and we'll catch you guys all in the very next Utility Sports video.